Hey, how's it going everyone? So in this video, I will show you how to automate the FIFA World Cup site using Playwright and TypeScript. So let's get started. So this morning, I was taking a look at the FIFA World Cup scores and I thought, hey, wouldn't it be cool to cover an end-to-end automation tool using this FIFA World Cup site? And since I haven't covered Playwright so far, I thought, why not start with this? So we're going to walk through a couple of different scenarios to get you a good understanding on getting started with Playwright. So let's do a quick introduction on Playwright. So Playwright is one of the most popular end-to-end automation tool. It's also one of the newest end-to-end automation tool in the market. And the reason it's so popular because it can work with any browsers. So you can run it on Chromium or any browser that supports Chromium. It can work with WebKit, which is Safari, and it can work with Firefox as well. It also works in cross-platform, so you can run it in Windows, macOS, Linux, and so on. And the best part about it is that it can support multiple languages. By default, it was built with Node.js, so it supports TypeScript and JavaScript, but it also has language bindings just like Selenium for Python, .NET, and Java. So if you're using Java in your existing company, you do not have to work with a new language. With Playwright, you can simply get started with using Java itself. Or similarly, if you're using Python, then you can do the same too. But for this particular video, I'm going to be covering Playwright with TypeScript. Now, Playwright has many other advantages such as it has auto wait, it has great assertions, it works with expect just assertions, you can get like really nice tracing reports, and there's basically no trade-offs here. So unlike other tools, Playwright does not really have any trade-offs or any technical limitations at the moment. So that's why it's a great tool to get started with, and in this video, we're going to cover just that. So let's go ahead and begin a setup and installation with Playwright. Alright, so over here, we're going to go ahead and install our Playwright. So for that, the very first step we need to do is to npm init playwright latest. So this will go ahead and initialize our Playwright project. So I'm just going to copy this command, and then I'm going to pull up a terminal. Alright, so in my terminal, the very first thing we're going to do is create a new folder. So I can do that by doing mkdir, or basically make directory. And then I'm going to name this one, let's say, pw FIFA, which is Playwright FIFA. I'm going to hit enter. Then I'm going to cd into this folder. You can also manually create the folder and then cd into that. Alright, the next thing I'm going to do is simply paste the command that we copied, which is npm init playwright at latest. It will go ahead and initialize our Playwright project by installing all of the latest projects. So it's asking us, do we want to install or use TypeScript or JavaScript? So in this case, I want to go with TypeScript. And then where do we want to put our end-to-end test? I'm going to keep it default in the test folder. Do we need GitHub Actions for CI/CD? I'm going to say no, at the moment I do not need that. And then whether we want to install Playwright browser manually or let Playwright install it for us. So I'm going to keep it default, let Playwright install the browsers for us. So there you go, it's initializing our npm project. And then it also installed the 3 packages, basically whatever was required for Playwright. And now our project is successfully initialized, so we can actually verify this by running the example test that it auto-generated for us. So for that, I'm just going to copy this command, which is npx playwright test, and I'm going to paste it here and hit enter. So this will go ahead and run the example test in 3 different browsers, so Firefox, Safari, as well as in Chrome. So you can see it's saying running 3 tests using 3 workers. So essentially it's running those individual tests in 3 different browsers, and it has created 3 different workers for us. So essentially created 3 different sessions for all 3 of the different browsers. So as you can see, it says our test successfully passed. So we have 3 passing. It took overall 8 seconds to run those 3 tests. And it also created an HTML report for us. So you can try to go ahead and open up this report. So I'm going to just copy paste this command and paste it here. So it says that it's trying to serve this HTML report on this particular port. And it opened this up for me on another screen. So I'll bring that up over here. There you go. So that's the HTML report that it generated for us. Now, before I get into this HTML report, let's take a look at what exactly just happened. We ran that initialize command and it automatically went ahead and installed all of the browsers for us. It set up the project for us also. And then it also set up HTML report for us. So we didn't really have to do any configuration manually. Playwright just went ahead and did this for us automatically. Now just imagine if you were doing this, let's say with Selenium, Java, doing it in old way, where you're setting everything up yourself. You're setting up the driver, you're installing all of the browsers manually, as well as you are going ahead and setting up, let's say, HTML report, something like this. Just imagine if you have worked with it, you would know how long it takes and how painful that is with going through different kind of configuration. With Playwright, with just one command, we were able to get it to work the entire thing. So that's the beauty we get by using this modern or test automation frameworks, because they do pretty much all the work for you. All you have to do is focus on just writing quality test. And even for that, they do lots of things for you, which will allow you to create really quality stable test, which we're going to get into shortly. But I just wanted to focus on this particular part here because this is the main beauty of working with this modern test automation frameworks. All right, so now let's look into this report. So you can see here it ran in 3 different browsers, and it's really nice because it tells you the browser it ran on by creating this kind of tag here. So we have Chromium, Firefox, and WebKit, and even tells you like how long the test took in each individual browser. So let's say the Firefox took the longest, then we had WebKit, and then Chromium was the fastest over here in 2.4 seconds. We have a really nice like a test title, the file name, and if I click on that, we get more information here. So these are all the test steps as well. So we know exactly which step was ran, what happened when we ran the test. So at the top, once again, the title. So we have a before hook. So hook is essentially it's trying to do something, some kind of setup before it's trying to run the test. In this case, it's creating a context of a new page. So the way Playwright works is every time it tries to run your test, it creates a new page context. So essentially think of it as an incognito browser that it gives you access to. So you have that incognito browser or that session that it creates for you. And once it has access to that page, then you can basically decide what you need to do. So you have the browser. So what do you want to do next? The next thing I'm saying, I want to open up this particular playwright.dev website. And this is also nice because it tells you the exact code also that it ran. So on line number 4, I ran page.goto command, which goes to this particular URL, which is the homepage of Playwright. And after that, I'm trying to verify the title. I'm making sure it has certain attribute. Then I'm doing a .click. I'm verifying the URL, and then I'm doing some kind of thing on after hook. So right even here, before I even open these test steps, I know exactly, or at least on a high level, what's going on over here. So let's say in my title, I can see, all right, I was verifying that the test title contains a substring, which is Playwright over here. So that makes sense. I'm opening up the Playwright website. I'm just making sure, does it have the title Playwright, right? And the next thing is verifying an attribute. So I verify, like say, some kind of get started element, and they're trying to make sure it has a link, which is docs intro. And this is the same get started button that we clicked on to access the documentation. So they're simply verifying that it has the HTML or the href link over there. The next thing is it's clicking on that button to actually go to that page. And then they're making sure, am I on that particular page or not, by simply making sure it has the URL intro. So if it has that URL, that they're assuming, yep, I'm on that page now. And then finally, since we created a new incognito session, it goes ahead and deletes that context which it creates for you. So browser context.close, it will automatically delete that for you. So you don't really have to, by the way, do this manually. All you do is just create your simple test steps, and Playwright will take care of that for you. It will open up the browser, it will close the browser. You're just focusing on your test steps as well as the assertions. That's all you're doing. And then if I go back to all over here, it's doing the same thing in Firefox. Right over here, it's doing the same thing in our WebKit as well. So over here as well, everything is same. So this is the overall test that Playwright auto-generated for us. Now we're going to open this up in VS Code and really look into exactly how this was being written in code-wise, as well as we're going to look into how a different configuration works that Playwright has automatically set up for us. So let's go ahead and do that. So I will go ahead and pull up my terminal. And I'm going to close this HTML report that it was running by pressing Ctrl+C. And I will clear my terminal. All right, so I'm in my pw.fifa folder already. So I have a shortcut to open this in VS Code by just simply typing code dot. What this will do is automatically open this up in VS Code for me. But you can also simply just open up VS Code or any IDE that you use and then open this folder. So it will go ahead and open that folder for you. I'm going to do is using this way, code dot, which is really nice. And there you go. So it has opened up VS Code for me, and this folder has already been opened up as well. So that's nice. And I'm going to expand this. All right, so this was all of the different folders Playwright created for us. So let's take a look at what exactly happened when we initialized our project. So at the very top, I have node modules. These are all the different packages that Playwright installed when we ran the initialize command. So I have Playwright, the types because we're using Typescript, and Playwright core. So pretty standard packages, so nothing to look over there. I have a Playwright report. So this was the HTML report that we were actually looking at. So that's good. And then I have test and test example. So before we dive down to test, let's actually take a look at our configuration over here, playwright.config.ts. So I'm going to go there. All right, at the top, we are importing some packages from Playwright test. So that's fine. And right here on line number 13 is where I have my configuration. So this is all of the configuration for my project that I've actually set it up. So on line 14, I'm saying all of my tests are going to reside inside the test folder. So this is what we have set it up when we were initializing the project. So I said, just keep it default. So it's going to be under test project. So if you create your test file anywhere outside of this test folder, Playwright would not be able to recognize it. But as long as you have your test file inside the test folder, it will know. And the next thing is the timeout. So this is the maximum timeout one test can run for, as it says in the comment. So in this case, it is 30,000 millisecond or 30 seconds. So that's good. So basically, if your test takes longer than 30 seconds, then it will time out. You can change it, let's say make it 50 seconds, for example, if you have a really long running test. But ideally, try to keep your test like really short, under 30 seconds is a good enough measure. And then I have an expect assertion as well. So this is not really the test timeout, but rather each assertion timeout. So if you notice over here, if I'm trying to, let's say, verify some locator has some text, that is considered an assertion. So I want to check how long do I want to wait for that particular assertion. So it has, by the way, automatically built-in waits added in. So you don't really have to add in your own wait saying that, hey, I want to wait for this particular element. So it's doing that for you. So it's saying by default, I'm going to wait 5,000 milliseconds. If the text doesn't show up in 5,000 milliseconds, then I'm just going to time out, which is fine. You can also change this if you want. And then you have fully parallel set to true. So by default, all of your tests will automatically be run in parallel mode. This is nice because this is allowing us to really speed up our overall test. So that's good. We have retries. So if, let's say, maybe you want your test to be retried if something fails, you can set that to locally. We don't need to do that. This is something people would do it in CI, so that if CI is, let's say, flaky, environment is slow, just rerun the test to make sure if this is an actual test issue versus, let's say, environment issue, some flakiness. And then we have workers and stuff. Let's ignore them for now. The reporter is what we talked about. This is the HTML reporter. It automatically set it up for us. We don't really have to do anything here, which is pretty nice. There's something called trace, which we're going to ignore for now. And this is important, projects. So projects is all the different browsers that it's trying to run your test on. So remember when we ran the test, it ran it in Chromium, Firefox, and WebKit. That's because we have this over here in our configuration. Now let's say you don't want to run it in Chromium, Firefox, and WebKit locally. You can just comment this out. And let's say, all right, I just want to run it in Chromium browser. And also another thing you might have noticed when we were running the test, it did not open up any browsers for us. So that means you didn't really see it happening in front of your screen. So if you want that, you can set the headless mode to false. By default, the headless mode is set to true. That means it's going to run your test in the background. You won't really see what's happening. But for your local testing, you want to make sure that you can actually see what's happening in the browser. So you can do that by just simply adding a new property called headless and set that to false. So now when you will run your test, it's actually going to open up a new browser. You can see it in front of your screen. And that way you would know exactly what actions you're taking with your test. So which is pretty nice. So this way, if I'm going to run my test, it's only going to run it in Chrome, which is nice. And then at the bottom, there's some more browsers. If you want to run it on, it's fine. So that's my overall configuration. Pretty much, we don't really have to change anything other than the browsers. Now, if I go to my tests now, which is really important, I have my example.spec.ts. So let's open that up. The test example is again another test, which we don't really care. So I'm just going to delete that for now. All right, this was the test that we actually ran. So let's take a look what's happening here. The very first line, we are importing our test and expect. So the test is the test block that we are running. So we are making sure that we first import this. So you can see here, this is the test that's being executed in the Playwright environment when you launch the browser. And every time it gives you a fresh page to each test. This is what I was talking about. With Playwright, whenever you're running a test block, it's giving a new page, essentially a new incognito browser or context that you can use whenever you're running your test. So if you, let's say, do a login in one test block, and then you do something else in second test block, the second test block would not have access to that login session. So there's way to you can actually handle that. But essentially what I'm trying to say is each test would have its own session. It would be in its own environment that's going to run in. And then the next thing is the expect, which is the assertion that we are using. So this is the just assertion that we're using, which is expect assertion over here. And we are importing this from Playwright test package. Now right here from line 3 to line number 20 is my test block. And as you can see, I have my test here and I have the title of the test. So making sure our homepage has a title and it has the links to intro page. And we are using async await. So this is because we're using promise in JavaScript. If you're not familiar with how promises work, go ahead and take a look at my promise video that I have added in this channel. And I will add the link for that in the description below. Promise is something really important if you're working with JavaScript frameworks, specifically the modern frameworks. They're going to be using promises everywhere. So you just have to be familiarized with how this works. This page is basically really important. So in our parameter over here, we create a new page, which is, I keep talking about this. The reason is because this is really important. You have to understand how this works. So this is the fixture it gives you. This page is the new test instance that it creates for you, like an isolated page instance. And it's going to be isolated between different tests, which is what I was talking about. And this is, you can see it in the description right over here. Cool. So once you have access to your page, then you can do certain commands. If you want to go to a particular website, you simply just say, I want to go to this website. Cool. It will automatically go there. And then if you want to verify some kind of assertion, you just say, hey, I expect my page to have a title. And then you can say, what title do you want it to have? And I said, all right, Playwright. So it's using, by the way, regex here, this 2 / it's regex. And I'm saying I want the title to contain a substring called Playwright. And then I'm also, let's say, creating a locator here using this. Don't really worry about it. We'll get into that in a bit. And then I'm kind of doing some more assertion here, clicking on the button and then verifying the URL. So this was my automatically generated test that Playwright created for us. We won't really have to worry about it. We're going to create our own test from scratch so that we understand how to begin our test from, let's say, an empty test file. And we will look into each step by step what we are doing so that you get a better understanding of how Playwright test works. So let's go ahead and start doing that. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is delete this example.spec.ts because we're going to create our own file from scratch. And then in the test folder, I'm going to create a new file and I will name this one home.spec.ts because we're going to be dealing with the homepage of the FIFA World Cup site. Cool. At the very top, if you remember, they actually had some packages, well, not packages, some properties that they were importing. So I'm just going to import. I'm going to import the test block. And then I'm going to also import the expect assertion. And I'm going to say import it from @playwright test. There you go. So this will give me access to the test block, which is we're going to need to add in all of our test steps. And then we will need some kind of assertion. So we're going to use the expect assertion for that. Perfect. So I will create my test block. In my brackets, I'm going to add in a title. So the title would be open homepage and verify title. That's it. And then I'm going to add in my brackets here. This is where my arguments will go in. And then I will create an arrow bracket. And then I will create a curly bracket. So I know there's a lot of things we are doing over here. And I'm going to hit enter here. So just make sure that you follow this exact syntax to create your test block. So we have our test, which has an open parenthesis and a closing parenthesis right here. And I have my arguments, which are stored here after the title. And then I create an arrow function. And within that arrow function, add in a curly brackets. And this is basically all of my test steps will go. So this is the common standard that you're going to be following for pretty much all of your Playwright test. By the way, I will have link for this entire code in the description below. So if you actually want to simply copy paste the code that I'm writing over here, you can do that as well. So just simply follow the link in the description below and then enter in all the details and you're going to get access to all of the code. Cool. So I'm going to go ahead and in my arguments over here, if you remember, each test actually needs a page. So I'm going to add that page here. So I'll add a curly bracket and I'm going to add page here. So what I'm saying is I need my test to have access to a page because page is where I can do things such as opening up my URL, verifying some kind of assertion and so on. And then over here, I'm going to make this test block an async test block because we're going to be using promises, as I mentioned before. And now I can go ahead and start writing my test. So the first step we're going to do is open up our home page. So I will just do await page.goto and then simply add in the URL that I want to go to. In this case, I want to go to the FIFA homepage. So we can do that by opening up that particular URL. So let me find that first. I'll open up Chrome. So this is the FIFA homepage. So I'm going to copy the URL and then go back, simply paste that here. Perfect. And now I'm going to go ahead and add in my assertion. So the assertion is verifying the title. So let's do that as well. So I'm going to do expect. And what do I want to expect? So I want to expect that the page should have some kind of title. So I'll say expect my page dot to have title. And then over here, I can just say the title it should have. Now I already know that the title for this particular page is FIFA Plus. And the way I found that out is by simply going back to your browser. If you hover over to your tab, you can see the title name. In this case, it is FIFA Plus. Another way is simply just doing right click and inspect. And in your DOM, right here, you can just search for title. And then it's going to tell you that the title is FIFA Plus. So you can just copy that. And then if you head back, just paste it over here. And you also want to make sure you add in an await block here. And the reason you need to add in await here is because we're using promises. Now, how do you know if you're using promise? Well, with any of the page commands that you're using, you pretty much will be using promise. So if I just hover over to this .goto, you can see here I'm using a promise. So it's returning a promise, so I need to wait for that promise to be resolved, and I can do that using async await. Once again, if you don't really understand how promises work, just check out the link in the description below where I discussed how promises work in detail. So you can just find that video, take a look at that, and then come back to this video. All right. Same thing here, .to have title has a promise as well. That's why I'm adding a await block there. Perfect. So this is our first test block. Let's go ahead and try to run this to make sure this works. So how do we run? Well, I'm going to open up a new terminal here in VS Code. And if you remember previously when we ran the test, we did npx playwright test. What this will do is it will go ahead and look into our test directory where it's going to find this file home.spec.ts and it's going to execute that. So let's do it. And you can see here it's only running it in one test using one worker, and it will also open up the browser for us. Well, at least it should. In this case, it did not open up the browser. So let me just go ahead and check my configuration. Go to playwright.config.ts. And yes, the headless is set to false. So it will go ahead and open up my browser. So let's run this again. All right, there you go. So it's opening it up. Maybe just open it up in background last time. So my test successfully passed right over here. So that's pretty good. So we have successfully created our first test with Playwright. And we can even go to the report to take a look at whether our test is working. So if I go to the report there, it's going to show us all of the test steps, which is pretty nice. So if I'll just open this up over here. All right, so there you go. We have our home page, verified title, I have Chromium, and pretty much all of the test steps that we added in over here, we can see here as well. Now, what if something failed, right? What would happen in that case? Well, let's take a look at that. I'm going to remove the plus sign over here, and my test would fail because it would expect FIFA Plus from the website, but over here it only has FIFA. So let's run that. This time it's going to actually fail. So let me make sure I run the right command. Okay, so I'm going to run the npx playwright test again. This time it will open up the browser. It's going to wait 5 seconds because that's the timeout that we have set up for an assertion. So you can see this time it's waiting longer. And my test failed. So it will open up a different browser for you. Similarly for me as well. It opened it up right here. And there you go. So it says my test failed. And I have a really nice error message right here. It's saying I was expecting FIFA because that's what we have added in our code. But what it got from the browser was FIFA Plus, which is correct. But at this point, if something fails, you can decide, do you want to keep FIFA Plus as your title? If that's the case, then you update your test to have FIFA Plus. If you don't want FIFA Plus, you just want FIFA, for example, then you can update your code block. Let's say your React, the website is built in React, so you can update your React code and you would just have FIFA over there. And then you also have some nice call logs. Interesting thing to notice over here is you're going to see it's trying to do multiple retries. So it's waiting for that locator, which is the root in this case. Then it's checking, hey, I got the title as FIFA Plus. It's going to try again which title it got. In the beginning, by the way, it has no title because it was loading the page. Then it got the title FIFA Plus. So it did a retry again. Is it still FIFA Plus? So it's going to keep doing it until it times out, which is what I was talking about on how timeout works. So Playwright is automatically taking care of this for you. You don't really have to do this on yourself. So this is really amazing because, well, you don't have to set up any retry logic. You don't have to set up any timeout logic. Playwright is taking care of that for you automatically. So this is really nice to making your test quite stable. So that's another one of the smart ways that Playwright has, which takes care of this for you. And then it also tells you which line filled. So you can see it says line number 6 actually filled because it was trying to verify the title FIFA, which was not the case, and that's why it failed. And at the bottom here, you can even see which exact test step failed. So the before hook was fine. There was no issue creating a page. There was no issue going to that URL itself. But there was an issue when it was trying to verify the title. So it says, yep, that's why it failed. But even after that, it ran the after hook to close that browser. So that's nice. We can see that opening up the browser, closing up the browser, all of that is working. Even going to that website worked. The only thing that failed was verifying the title. So if I just close this and fix this by doing FIFA Plus and then run my test again, it will once again pass. So let's take a look at that. So over here. And there you go. So my test passed once again. So perfect. That was our first test. If you notice, there's not really much code that we written over here. At the first line, I'm simply just importing the test block as well as the expect assertion. And then I'm simply just saying, okay, go to this URL. And then I want you to verify this title. That's all. There's no weights I'm adding in. There's no custom logic I'm doing here. Playwright is taking care of that for me. So that was my first test. Now let's go ahead and write our second test where we're going to actually interact with an element. So let's do that. So the next test is going to be pretty simple as well. What we're going to verify is that our website has the logo, which is this particular logo right here. And we're going to simply make sure that the logo is visible. Another thing we can also do is verify that the logo has the alt title, which is Qatar 2022. As you can see, that's being highlighted over here. So if I just do right click and inspect on this. Okay, so right here is my image, which is the image for the logo. And then in my image, I have this alt title, which is Qatar 2022. So we're going to verify that it has the attribute title with this value. So that can be, let's say, one of the indicator that we are trying to verify. And the next thing we're going to do is the main test is going to be simply making sure that the logo is actually visible. So we're going to find a unique ID for this. So perhaps we can do that using, let's see. So I can verify it using the href right over here. So I can just copy this and do paste. And right over here, you can see this is a unique ID. So the href FIFA Plus EN home is unique for this particular logo. So that's what I'm going to verify. So I'll just copy this and I'm going to head back to my VS Code. Now we're going to go ahead and create a new test block. So I'm going to create a new test block here and I'm going to say verify logo is visible and has the alt title. That's all. Similarly, just the way we did it for our previous test, we're going to do the same things here. I'm going to create the page context because this test will have its own page context, and I'm going to add in a async over here, just the way we did it over here. Perfect. So for this page also, we want to go to this URL. So I'm going to first paste this element, which I copied, and then I'm going to copy this entire thing. I'm going to paste it here. So we are going to this URL. And now we want to verify the element, right? So we want to make sure that the element is actually visible. So the way we can access an element in Playwright is by using page.locator. So I'm saying the locator, the selector for that locator is going to be this thing right here. So this is my CSS selector. So I'm going to paste that there. So this is the locator that I'm going to be working with. Now here, I don't really need to use await because this is not really a promise, but I am going to assign this to a variable. So I'm going to call this logo. And you can see that now logo has a page locator, which is this FIFA home right here. Now in my assertion, I want to verify that this logo is visible. So let's do that. I'm going to say await, expect, logo, and we can do dot to be visible, which is again a locator assertion that's been provided by Playwright. So we're going to use that. All right, so we have kind of covered the first step, which is making sure that the logo is actually visible. We can try to run this to make sure this is working successfully. So to do that, I'm just going to do npx playwright test. And you're going to notice something different here once I'm going to run it. So let's do that. You can see it's saying running 2 tests using 2 workers. That means it's running this file, which has 2 tests in 2 different browsers, which has its own context. So they're not really shared with each other. And you can see both of them successfully passed. So that's pretty good. All right, so we have verified that the logo is visible. The next thing I'm going to verify that it has the alt title. So we can do that as well. So let's kind of remove this extra lines here. Now here I can add in another assertion called await, expect, logo. And this time I'm going to say to have attribute. Then it's going to tell me what attribute do I want. So like the name and the value. So the name in this case is going to be title. And the value was, well, let's copy the value from our DOM. So I'm going to go back to my browser. And then I'm going to paste this title here. Now it does have a special character. I don't know how that's going to work, but let's just copy it to see if it works. And I'm going to head back and then just paste it here. So let's run this to see whether this would work. Now, by the way, all I did was just said it should have attribute title and the title value should be this particular thing right here. So similarly, like before, I'm going to run this test. Now I have 2 assertions in this test. Now this is the thing, it's kind of up to you how many assertions you want in your test. You can have multiple assertions. There's no in particular restrictions of how many assertions you can have. All right, so see my test seems like it's failing, so probably something is wrong. So that's a good thing. So let's go back to my error to see what exactly is going wrong here. Okay, so over here you can see that the title that I'm getting back for logo is empty. So it's saying I'm not really getting anything back. Now, why is that? Well, let's go back to my DOM and see what's happening. So I am saying that this href should have a title, like this anchor link should have a title, although the title is part of the image itself. So it's not part of the anchor tag here, rather it's part of the image, which is this right here. Oh my God, I hate this, keeps showing me this image. All right, so the title is actually part of this image tag here. So maybe I can update my locator to have anchor tag and then image and then verify whether that is visible. So let's do that. Now, by the way, guys, I'm just trying this out for the first time as I'm going. So there are some things that might work, some might not. So we're gonna just figure this out on our own. So this logo right here is, I'm gonna keep this as it is, and then I'm gonna add in the image tag. So I'm saying, okay, use this anchor link and then go to this image. And from there, I want you to verify the title. All right, I think this might work. Let's try it out. And I'm gonna run this again. All right, so if your test closed really quickly, that means it worked. And as you can see, it says to pass right over here. So that's pretty good. So that means I've created my second test. In this one, the really important thing for you guys to specifically notice is how you can access a locator. So we did that by doing page.locator. And within locator, I can pass in my selector. So the selector I'm using over here is the CSS selector. So I'm saying, all right, the selector I want you to use is this particular thing. So which is the CSS selector that I created. First was an href, then I've added the image tag itself. So go to that href, then go to the image within that href, and then I want you to verify whether that logo is visible. And then I also want to verify from, let's say, the accessibility perspective that the logo also has the title, which is Qatar 2022. So this is really nice kind of accessibility check you're doing while you're writing a test as well. Perfect. So this was our second test. We tried running it together to make sure this is working. In the next test, we're going to do a little bit different. Instead of working with, let's say, just an individual element, we're going to try to work with multiple elements and see how that will work. So let's go ahead and do that. Okay, so the next test we're going to look at is how we can work with multiple elements, which is over here. So we have this navigation menu, and within the navigation menu, we have this different text. So let's say you want to verify the text of all of this navigation menu links over here, right? So let's select that. So I'm going to select, let's say, the first link, and then let's try to see what we get over here. So I can see that I can access the entire navigation using this nav class, which has an ID of main links ID, which is nice. So I can just enter that. And within that, I want to access all of this different links. So like the news link, the highlights, TV scores, and so on. So for that, I also have this anchor link here. So if I just simply add an A, maybe that will give me access to all the links. So let's test it out. So the first one is, the second one is highlight, then TV scores, then live and blog, teams, fantasy, originals, and so on. So this is good. Basically, this is what we want. So my selector is going to be my main links ID, which is my navigation. And then I want to go into the anchor links. So if you can notice, it's giving us 13 nodes in total. So that's what we're going to work with. So I'm not working with, let's say, an individual element here. I'm working with multiple elements. And now we're going to try to get the text and then assert the text is expected to whatever we have in our expected value. So let's go ahead and create a test for this. So I'm going to go back to VS Code. All right, so I'm back in VS Code. Now, once again, we're going to create a new test block. So I'm going to do the same thing as this. Just copy paste it over here. The first step is going to be same. We are actually opening up the web page. So everything remains the same. Now, the next thing is getting access to that locator. So we have already learned. So let's say I can name this nav links. To access a locator, we can do page.locator. Now, the good part with Playwright is we don't really have to differentiate whether we are working with, let's say, an individual locator or a multiple locators. So that means the locator would return an individual element or a multiple element. We do the same thing. We do page.locator and simply add in the selector here. So in this case, it's going to return us multiple elements. In previous case, it was only returning a single element. So that doesn't really change the way we want to actually write our test. All right. So now we're going to verify the text of this nav links. So let's do that. So in Playwright, there's a really easy way you can actually get the text of multiple elements. And you can do that by doing, let's say, await, expect, nav links. And then here, right before this bracket is closed, I'm going to do dot, and I have something called all inner text. Essentially, I'm saying give me the access to all of the inner text of those locators. So it's going to go to each locator one by one, kind of in a loop automatically. You don't have to set this up, by the way, yourself. Playwright will take care of it for you. It's going to go and check each individual link item. And then I'm going to say it should equal to, and obviously we want it to equal to the expected links, right? Which we don't really have right now. So I can just do const expected links. And this would be an array because it's going to have a list of items. Now, obviously, I don't really know what those links are. I mean, I can go to the browser and then look into each individual link and then try to run it, or basically try to copy those, paste it here, which is going to take a little bit of time because we have 13 elements over there, right? Instead, I'm just going to say it should be equal to this expected link. So the way it's kind of cheating, because what we're saying is get me the text, all the inner text, and then verify it with this empty link. So it's going to return you an error saying that, oh, you were trying, what we got back was, let's say, the nav, the scores, and the TV, and so on. I got all of this back, and you're trying to compare with an empty array, which is not true, which is fine. But what we're going to do is we're going to copy all of those expected links that it's, or the received links that it got, and we're going to copy to our expected link and then run our test to make sure whether that link would actually work or not. So let's do that. It probably sounds confusing right now, I know, but let's just run this and you will understand what I mean. So I'm going to do same thing, npx playwright test. It's going to go ahead and execute all 3 tests together, which is fine, not really an issue. Oh, okay, so I just realized something. I was trying to run the test and it's saying it skipped. And the reason that happened is because I have a duplicate test titles. So this is really interesting. I wasn't really expecting this error to come up, or in fact was going to cover in this video. But essentially what happened is, since I copy paste the same test, I forgot to change the title. If the title is same, your test won't run and you might get an error like this: duplicate test titles are not allowed. So make sure whenever you create a test title, it's really unique. So in this case, of course, I'm trying to do something else. I'm not verifying the logo. So I'm going to say verify navigation links. That's basically what I'm trying to do. So I'm going to run my test again, and this time it should trigger all 3 of the tests. You can see it's running it now. All right, so I ran the test and the test is actually failing. So if I just look at what the error is, So over here, while it was trying to get the inner text, it actually failed because of timeout. So it actually timed out while trying to get the text. So let's see why that is happening. So I'm doing await and I have a line here. Await does not. Oh, okay. I think I know what's going on. So I'm using await here, and in this place, actually, we do not need to use await. Now, if you remember, I told you use await where we're using promise. So in dot to equal, we're not really using promise. So I don't, you can see here, it says there's no promise here, right? So I can just remove this, and instead all inner text returns me a promise. So I need to handle this. So I can add in a await over here instead. So this is where I'm basically adding in my await. Now, if I try to run this should work technically. Let's try it out. Okay, so it did work, a test passed, but it's actually something is funny here, right? We should have expected a test to fail. You can see here it says 3 passed. So something happened along the way. So it tried to get the text of all the navigation links, and it says it probably returned an empty array, because what might have happened in this case is it went to this website, it got access to this link, and by the time it got access to the alt text, the website or the page already closed. So there's some kind of, let's say, a timing issue happening over here, which is causing this to fail. And if you see some weird stuff like this, an easy way you can do is add in kind of a custom wait. And we can do that in Playwright, like a hard-coded wait. And I'm going to tell you how to fix that later on. But to do that, you can just do await page.wait for timeout. So we can wait for some time of like a pause here and say maybe wait for, I don't know, 3000 millisecond. So in this case, I'm saying just wait for 3000 millisecond, and from there, just try to run it again, the next step, and hopefully this time that should give us the right error that we were expecting. So let's do that. Anytime, by the way, you see any kind of this weird issues where something is happening which you're not expecting, just try to add in this kind of timeout, which will give you a good sense whether this is really a timing issue. In that case, you have to figure out some good way of handling that timeout. So there you go. This time our test failed, and that's nice because we wanted it to fail. And then we can actually see all of this array item being returned. So you can see it's telling me news, highlight, TV, blah, 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 blah. All those things are being returned. So that's good because this is actually what we wanted. We wanted it to fail for the right reason. Obviously, we are expecting it with an empty array, which is wrong. And it did actually open up a test report for me. So let me bring that up over here. And the reason I'm opening test report is if I just open this up, the navigation link, it's kind of giving me access to all of these things right here. So I can just copy that. Honestly, I was expecting this to just return me without the plus, but that didn't really happen. So it kind of gave me like this, which is fine. So I'm just going to copy that and then head back. And I'm just going to paste it right here. And then I will get rid of all of this plus here. So I can just do Command D, or if you're using Windows, you can just do Control D and select all of this plus at the same time and then remove them. And then I can also add in the square brackets here. Actually, we don't need square brackets. This is good enough. So I'll just copy all of this thing and then paste them here and then just kind of format it. Perfect. So this is my expected links right here. So this is, by the way, this is a cheat way of getting access to all of those links. You can verify whether these links are correct. If they are correct, then you can just add it in your automation test. Now we're going to try to run a test again, and this time it should work. So let's see whether this would work. You could have, by the way, also printed out the inner text. That would have been even like an easier option instead of just removing all of those plus and so on. There you go. So with this time we ran, it says 3 out of 3 passed. So that's great. That means it's working as expected. And we even know that we added a timeout, so it must be actually working the way we want. And you can even test it out. For example, remove this news, just move the S at the end, and if it fails, then you know it's working. So the issue over here is we're using this hard-coded timeout. So the reason for that is, for some reason, it's not actually waiting for these links to return the text. So in this case, what you can do is add in some kind of another assertion where you're waiting for this text to actually load up on the screen. So what do I mean by that is, let's say if I go back to my browser, Over here, maybe I can wait for these links to actually load up. So I can say make sure that they are actually visible on the screen. Once the links are visible, then I want you to go ahead and get the text. Because right now, even if the DOM loads, it's simply trying to get the text from the elements, and maybe these are taking a little bit of more time to load it up. So we just want to make sure we add some extra assertion, which will make sure we are waiting for those elements to load up in the DOM and it's there on the screen. Then we try to get the text of that. So let's try to do that to see whether that would work. So I'm going to remove this timeout. And here I'm going to add in another assertion. So I'm going to do expect. And I will say, I want the nav links to actually load up. And I don't really care of like all the nav links to load up. I'm just going to say load the first one. So I can do that by doing .first. So what it will do is it will load the first navigation link. So it, for example, the news link, like this one, if that loads up, we can assume the other ones have loaded up as well. Now I'm going to say that should be visible, for example. And then I'm going to add in a await because .to be visible actually uses a promise. So this is a good indicator because instead of using a hard-coded wait, I'm saying, hey, rather than that, rather wait for this particular element to be there. If that element is there, then you go ahead and get the text. So hopefully this should work. Let's try it out. All right, so this did work, and you can see we got 3 out of 3 passed. So that's perfect. So now we were actually able to work with even multiple elements. We were able to get the text of all of those elements and even verify it with our expected links that we have over here. So that's pretty nice. By the way, you can just this way, once you have access to this, let's say multiple links, you can even do other things. Let's say try to manipulate the links, change the text, do whatever you want to do, and do an assertion on that as well. So that's totally up to you, but I just kind of gave you an access of how you can work with multiple elements as well. And then kind of verify the text for those multiple elements. Perfect. So we kind of went ahead and looked into different ways on how we can do a basic test of opening up our home page, verifying the title, how we can work with individual elements such as, let's say, our verifying our logo, have different kind of assertion, making sure it's visible, it should have some kind of attribute. And then we even checked how we can work with multiple elements and then ensure that whether an individual element is visible over there. We can change this .first to .last as well. That's fine too. And then making sure how we can get the text of all those different links and then verify it with our expected links. So that's pretty good. So the next thing we're going to do is, one of the annoying part is when a test is failing, it's automatically opening up the report for me. And that's really annoying because sometimes I don't want that HTML report to open up. So I need some kind of way for the Playwright to understand that, hey, I don't want to open up the Playwright report automatically. Only open it when I will run this kind of command. This is optional, by the way, you don't have to do it. But it's kind of nice when you're doing a local testing so that it doesn't keep opening up that opening up that report for you. If you want it, you can open up the HTML report. Otherwise, just the local report that you get in the terminal is oftentimes good enough. It's kind of an annoying thing that Playwright does, but we can change that in the configuration. So let's go ahead and take a look at on how we can do it. All right, so to disable that report, I'm going to close this file and I'm going to go to my configuration. And within my configuration, I'm going to go to reporter, which is here for me on line number 33. And then this is where I'm actually adding my HTML report. So what I'm going to do is add in 2 square brackets here. So make sure you add in 2 square brackets. And within the inner square bracket, I'm going to add in a comma. I'm going to add in a curly bracket. And then here, I'm just going to do open. So basically, you have multiple options for open. Either you can do always, never, or on failure. So if something fails, then it's going to open up the report, or it's going to always open up the report, or it's going to never open up the report. In my case, I'm saying, hey, just don't open up the report. I'm going to manually open up the report if something I want to take a look at in the HTML report. But other than that, just keep the report by default disabled so that you don't really open it when something fails. So let's go back to our test and test it out. So here I'm going to fail this test. I'm going to, let's say, remove news. Maybe I can remove the whole thing. And then now let's run it to see whether our test would fail. So this time, if the test fails, it should not open up the HTML report. Perfect. So if you notice, our test closed, it did not automatically start up the server for HTML report, And it's saying if you do want to open it up, simply just run this command and then you can open that up. And my test failed here as well because it was expecting news to be there, which it wasn't. So this time I can manually go ahead and open up the report because maybe I want to look at the HTML report due to whatever reason. So let's do that. I'm going to bring that up over here on the screen. And if I go to verify navigation links, yep, you can see I have the same error. So now I have the control of whenever I want to open up the report, I can, but it's not automatically going to open it up for me. And basically, anytime your test is failing, it's kind of opening 10, 15 tabs for you, which is kind of annoying because you got to keep closing it. And it is always keeping up the server opened up. So which is something that you would not want to work with if you're often trying to figure some things out and your test is failing quite often. So this is kind of like a nice way of disabling the report and only do it when you want to open it up. Pretty much, to be honest, 95% of the time, you don't really have to open up the HTML report. It's only when you're kind of sharing those reports with others, that's when HTML report is important. Other than that, just local run is good enough by looking at the terminal to see what's going on and understanding what's happening there. But yeah, if you need a more visual, then sure, feel free to open up the report by just doing npx playwright show report. All right, so the next thing we're going to look at is how we can actually debug when something goes wrong. So if a test fails, how we can debug our test. So that's what we're going to look into, one of the ways we can do debugging with Playwright. So now let's take a look at how you can debug your test when something goes wrong. Maybe your test is failing and you don't really understand why it's failing, and you want to debug it from that particular step. So let's see how we can do that. And I'm only going to cover one of the ways on doing it. There's multiple ways you can do it with Playwright, and I've covered a bunch of ways in my course. But for now, I'm just going to cover one ways using browser.pause, or basically page.pause. So let's do that. So maybe before this nav links, we can assume that, say, if you're having some difficulty finding this nav links, something is failing on this particular line. It's not finding that locator. So we can do that by just adding in a wait and then doing page.pause. So over here, you can see it says that it will pause your script execution at this particular step, which is exactly what we want. So that's pretty good. Now let's try to run our test and see what will happen this time. So I'm going to do the same thing, npx playwright test. So it's going to go ahead and execute all three of our tests. And there you go. We have one of our tests being paused at this particular location. And we have this new window that got opened up, which has probably opened up for you as well, which is called a Playwright Inspector. So let me expand this a bit so that you can see what's going on here. So in this Playwright Inspector, we have our entire test file. So that's interesting. Now let's see what we can do with it. So over here, we have a highlight, which is page.pause. So at this particular location, you can see that our test has been paused. And the state of that window is this right now. That means at this point, when the test paused, this was the state of your website. So that's good. So the next thing that we're doing is finding this locator. So maybe let's assume something is going wrong when you're trying to find that locator. And you're going to try to find it manually through your inspector. So let's see how we can do that. So the good part is when you have access to your inspector, you can still go ahead and make changes to your browser. So over here, first of all, let's get rid of this privacy. So I'm going to do reject all. And now I have an option called explore here. So I'm going to click on explore. And now I can basically highlight any particular item over here. So maybe I want to click on this news link, let's assume. So if I click on this, by the way, even before I click, you can see it's suggesting me that I can use this selector called get by role. And I have this other options as well. So I have this locator, which I can use, which is locator main links id.get by role. And it's also giving me kind of a different option. So let's assume we select this one. So it's telling me, okay, if I want to access this locator, I can simply just do it by get by role. So this is another way of finding that particular locator. I don't have to go with, let's say, a link ID or CSS selector or so on. There are different ways Playwright will provide you where you can find that locator. So that's nice. Maybe if something you were struggling with finding a locator for this news link, you can use this explore tool to find that. And let's try it for different screen as well, or different elements. So maybe the search, if I do that, search has kind of the same thing, get by role. This has get by role as well. What about this matches? All right, the matches is interesting because if I select that, I'm getting get by text this time. So that means you can find an element using get by text as well. So you don't have to go with, let's say, just get by role for a link or a button. You can even find it by get by text. And you can see it's doing get by text. and get the matches text and then get the nth element to 1. Basically, give me the first element. And there might be, because multiple text on this website which has matches text. So it's saying just give me the first one, which is probably going to be this one over here. So this explore tool is actually really beneficial, specifically if you struggle with finding elements or finding locators or creating your own custom CSS selectors. Just go ahead and try to use this explore tool, and it will pretty much most of the time will do a good job. And the reason I said it will do most of the time a good job is because let's say if I select this explore and go to this FIFA World Cup, right? We tried looking into the locator for FIFA World Cup, but if you notice this over here, it kind of gave me this entire locator right here. So it couldn't really figure out a better way to give me this locator. Comparatively, the locator that we used was an href, which was much easier to work with, and also that was not dynamic. In this case, this might be dynamic because you have this custom ID that they're using over here. So the way this sometimes in particular websites, the way this custom IDs work is when you refresh the page, this ID will change again. So you might copy this locator and then try to run it and it won't really work. And the reason being is in your particular case, when the website will load, it will have a different ID. So that's why this explore tool is good, but at the same time, you should also know how to create your own custom CSS selector as well, specifically for scenarios like this where you get an ID which is dynamic. But most of the time, like I said, you can kind of work with this and it's going to give you like a nice selector that you can work with. So you can see here, it's kind of giving me get by role most of the time. I can get by text in particular scenarios as well. And that's nice because I can use this whenever I want to, instead of me trying to figure out my own custom selector, going inside the DOM level line by line. I can simply just copy paste it and put it over there. So that's one of the option with debugger, or basically with inspector. The next thing I can do is, let's say I have tried this particular step and I know that I got the locator for that. I can just do next over here. Then it's going to skip to the next step here, which is this assertion. So I can even see that, hey, is my assertion working? I can kind of do next. If that works, yeah, that means I know things are looking good. And this one is kind of giving me the inner text. So you can see here that this is kind of giving me the inner text, and it's highlighting all of those different elements for me. So this is kind of a nice indicator of skipping to the next step. And if maybe you've added a pause here, but you want to go to the next steps to see step by step what is happening, you can look at over here and it's going to tell you that right here, 13 of 13 locators have been selected. So you would know that, all right, whether it's selecting all the locators or not. This way you can see, yep, it is selecting it. And it can even see that it's telling you that out of those 13 of 13, 8 are visible on the screen. The remaining ones are probably, let's say, behind the screens when you click on those arrow to open up the drop down and so on. So it's kind of a nice way of understanding what's going on over here. And it's kind of a nice descriptive option over here. So other than that, we have obviously this option. So I'm just going to select play here and it will go ahead and close this for me, which is fine. That doesn't really matter. And then I'm going to go back to the same screen. And there's another thing you can actually do with page.pause, which is actually quite interesting. And that's something I've tried it in the past. So let me just open that up. All right, so it has opened up again. And let me just expand this. Cool. I'm going to just do once again, reject all. I have an option called record here. So this is a record and play, just the way if you're familiar with Selenium IDE, you can do record and play there. You can do the same thing over here. But this one is actually really interesting the way it's going to work out, because I'm going to click on record there. And now I'm on this screen. Now I can do something over here. For example, I want to click on news. So I click there. All right, so that's nice. Maybe from there, I want to change the language to, I don't know, French. I want to change it back to English again. I can do that, change it back to English. And then I want to click on the back button. Perfect. So this is my overall test. Now, if I go back and click on record, or basically stop the recording, you can see I have this entire test that is automatically get created by Playwright, and I can simply copy paste this in my code. Now, if you read this, it's going to look a little bit weird because this is not what we were working with. And the reason being is this particular test is not using Playwright test. And you can see it at the top. It's not using Playwright test. So we have to switch this to use Playwright. Oh, by the way, this is using the default Playwright library, which is not what we want. I'm going to switch this in the dropdown right here. I'm going to say use test runner instead. Now this test runner is pretty interesting because it's exactly the way we were writing our test. So you can see it's first created this test block. I have the exact same thing, test and expect. It's going to that link, it's clicking on the news link, it's changing the language, and it's really nice because you didn't really have to do anything. Playwright did everything for you. It's selecting French, it's going back and clicking on French, and then it's again clicking on English, and then it's clicking on the back button. So you can pretty much just run this test. Let's try to run it again. Well, actually this won't run, I would have to copy paste that. But essentially you can imagine you can just copy that entire thing and run it, and it will automatically take care of that for you. So let me just open that back up again because I wanted to show one more thing there. All right, so it opened up this Playwright inspector for me once again. Now I'm going to click on record again and kind of go through the similar steps. First, let me just reject this. I'll click on record. I'm going to go to this time, same thing, news. And then I'll just switch the language once again, go to French, go back to English, and then click back once again. Perfect. And I'm going to stop this. So remember I told you can go to test runner to see the language right here, which is from the test runner in the Node.js or the JavaScript language. But you can actually work with different languages. Let's say if you're using Java, you can switch it to, well, Java only has an option for library, but for Python, you can go to PyTest, and it's going to give you like a really nice option with Python on how this code will look like when you're working with PyTest using the Playwright library. So you can see here, I can do similar thing in Python as well. If I go to Java, let's see, where's Java? Java is right here. So Java has a library, but it kind of gives you the similar option. You have the entire class here, and it's trying to do, let's say, the same thing. It's creating your browser, but this is a little bit different because it's not using the test runner. They don't really have that supported at the moment, but most likely you might have that in future where they might support your Java test runner as well. And you can get like a nice way of doing the same thing with Java as well. But essentially they have this in different language. You have this, let's say, in your .NET as well, if you are someone who's writing tests in .NET. But anyways, if you're working with Node.js, this is what you're going to be doing. You can simply copy paste this code and then try to run this. And it should pretty much from here, all you have to do is just make some little bit of tiny changes in your script. And you will have your script ready, like literally really right away without having to do too much of work. Simply just do record and play. It's going to find those elements for you and simply just copy those elements, put it in your code, make some changes, and then kind of go from there. So this is something like a really good option available for you anytime you want to kind of use your Playwright debugger. Now there's other ways on actually how you can debug as well. But once again, like I said, I have covered this in my course. So if that is something you're interested in, make sure to check out the link in the description below for the course where I've went ahead and talked a little bit more in detail on how the debugging would work in Playwright. So that was kind of an overview, guys, on how the Playwright Inspector works and how debugging works in Playwright Inspector. So that was a quick overview in getting started with Playwright. We started off with setting up our project, we looked into Playwright configuration, and then we also dived into how to write our own Playwright test, working with single element as well as multiple elements. And then finally, we also looked into how we can do debugging with Playwright as well. Now, if you're interested in learning more about Playwright, then I have a full course on this where I'm going to cover different topics such as a step-by-step guide on how to write your test. We also go a lot more in detail on how to debug your test. In this video, I only covered one way, but there are a lot of other ways as well on how you can debug your test and quickly understand the root cause of the test issues. And then we're going to also look into how you can not just write tests, but also build a fully functional framework as well. With that, we're going to also take a look at a popular common pattern which you're going to use when building your framework, which is page object model. So we're going to see how page object model works with Playwright. We're going to also look into then how to further optimize your test framework. We're going to start off with, let's say, creating a basic framework, and then we're going to look into how we can optimize the test framework by different methods as well. And then we're going to look into how we can create our own custom beautiful reports using the Allure reporter, where we can add in a lot more customization as well and add in our trace reporter, which we're going to cover in this course. And then we will also look at how we can integrate all of this thing together using our CI/CD, which we're going to cover with GitHub Actions. And there's a lot more covered as part of this course as well. So if you're interested, make sure to check out the link in the description below that will get you this course on the cheapest price possible. But if you're looking to expand your SDET skills and learn not just Playwright but also other frameworks as well as for both web and mobile, then you can join the SDET Academy where I help you become one of the best SDETs in the industry. I'm giving a special discount on the full year membership using the coupon code GETSTARTED. So link for both of them will be in the description below. So thanks for watching guys. If you'd like to support my work, you can do that by liking and subscribing to this channel as well as sharing this video with others. That's all for now guys. I will see you all in the next one.